Hi, my name is Dwayne Gathers, and welcome to Civitas LA, featuring diverse and emerging leaders who make up this dynamic region and are creating community every day and building a better tomorrow. These bi-weekly conversations enable us to hear from, learn from, and be inspired by a new generation of civic entrepreneurs who are forging a path forward in making our region a stronger, more resilient, and connected group of citizens. Our goal is to elevate civic discourse, foster community connections, and promote civic knowledge and engagement while elevating diverse and emerging voices in that conversation. Formed in 1921 to replace the old Hollywood Board of Trade, the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce has represented and advocated for a cross-section of businesses large and small, nonprofit organizations, and residents throughout the greater Hollywood community. As the second largest business organization in the LA region, the Chamber also has the unique distinction of managing two globally important assets, A, the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and B, the globally known Hollywood sign. So as Civitas LA celebrates Women's History Month, I am delighted to be joined in studio by Ms. Lupita Sanchez Cornejo, Regional Vice President, External Affairs for AT&T, and a civic leader in her own right over many years, but also the first Latina to serve as the chair of the board of the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce in its 100-year history. Lupita Sanchez Cornejo, welcome to Civitas LA.
Dwayne, thank you so much for having me here today. I appreciated the invitation as we celebrate Women's History Month, as we celebrate the contributions that women who have come before me. And here in the beautiful heart of Hollywood, at one of our beautiful campuses, and a member of the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce, it's a great honor for me to be here today with you as we come up on the second anniversary of Civitas LA.
We appreciate you being here on the beautiful campus of Emerson College. On Civitas LA, we always ask our guests to offer a brief personal introduction. So tell us about Lupita Sanchez Cornejo.
I was born and raised in Southeast Los Angeles in a community called Bell, California. I went to local schools. I'm a proud product of LA Unified School District. Went to Woodlawn Elementary, Heliotrope, and Bell High School. And from there, went to school at USC. I spent a little bit of time in Washington, D.C., Sacramento. I've spent some time in different regions doing different work. And I'm first generation. My parents were both born in Mexico and, like many other families, came to Los Angeles in search of the American dream. I have 3 siblings. My parents had 2 sets of twins.
Oh, wow. And
my mom always says it was very hard, and at the time it seemed like there was so many children, but she looks back now and sees, 4 grown kids. It wasn't as hard. But I'm very proud of my background, the history, the work that my parents have done. But before that also, I come from a strong line of hard-working women. My grandmother, who I adore and unfortunately don't see her as often as I'd like, was widowed in her 20s.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And she is a pillar of strength. She is a prayer warrior, adores her family, and she prays for us daily. But when I think about the kind of struggles that she had, 5 young kids, widowed in her 20s, and had to figure out how to navigate and how to raise her family. And so she became an entrepreneur. She's a seamstress, and at the time opened up a small little business in the hometown where she was from. Mm-hmm. And I think about how that relates to a lot of our solo entrepreneurs in Hollywood and entrepreneurs, how you start with a vision. And many times it's the hustle to be able to provide for your family. And it was a small store, household items, but she was able to move forward. And so that's part of my history, and I'm very proud of it.
That's great.
And happy to share that with you.
That's great. Well, Lupita, you've been involved, as we mentioned, at certainly in external affairs roles in the public and private sector. And as a podcast focused on civic engagement and community, you've been involved in community from a work standpoint. But we always ask, what does civic engagement mean to you, and how did you begin your own community involvement here in the region?
I started my community involvement at a very young age. I remember volunteering at local convalescent hospitals.
Okay.
And it was through school that was the kind of the connector there. It was an opportunity to engage with the community. And the principles that held back then are very much true today. How do you get to know your community and the pulse of the neighborhoods is by being out there, by engaging with them. And whether it was volunteering at a local convalescent hospital in Bell, or I was the first youth commissioner in the city of Bell, appointed
really?
by my mayor many, many years ago.
Okay.
But I think about that, and I'm proud of that because I started my civic engagement decades ago.
Okay.
And I will be honest, at the time when it was presented to me, I wasn't sure what I could bring to the table. But really what I learned is it's about diversity of thought. And it's about bringing the youth perspective and community development in the city of Bell. And so that's what I brought to the table. And fast forward, I've now had the privilege of serving the city of Los Angeles on different commissions. I currently serve the state of California and Californians by being a member of the Earthquake Early Warning Advisory Board and appointee of Speaker Anthony Rendon, who represents Southeast LA cities and a close friend. And that's what I think about, is about continuing to be involved, giving back to your community, and really it's about uplifting our communities. And if you have the passion and the power and the time to be able to do that, get in there and let's bring people up.
Absolutely. Well, in our introduction, we referenced, your incoming as chair of the board of the Hollywood Chamber, an organization that celebrated 100 years now, and that, in fact, you are the first Latina or the first Latino to serve as chair of the board of the second largest business group in our region. What are you excited about, and what does that mean to you personally?
When I think about Hollywood, I think it's a brand that is recognized worldwide. Whether it's our famous Hollywood sign, those 9 letters that are iconic and recognized throughout the world. When you think about the Walk of Fame. And many times people may not recognize when you say Porter Ranch, for example, but you say Hollywood, and yet both are in the city of Los Angeles, and their eyes light up, and it's a community that people know. It is an international city. Here in Hollywood, we have people represented from countries from all over the world, and probably outside of their home countries, LA is their home. And so when you think about the diversity that Hollywood represents here in LA and in the community, and the largest people from all over the world, and it's look back now and think 100 years, and now we have the first woman of color, is pretty incredible to look at that. But also, the dynamics are changing in our communities. The dynamics are changing in our business culture. And so it should be reflective of our city.
You in your role, certainly at AT&T, you're involved in so much across our region. And as you referenced around civic engagement, it's about also people being able to find a passion, but also finding the time. So I'm going to ask you, your time is limited and you've got a family to raise. How did you become involved in the Hollywood Chamber specifically?
Well, I work for a company. I've been with AT&T for 21 years. I joined there after leaving the mayor's office, where I was part of the executive team. And the company has allowed me the opportunity to really build those relationships, make those connections. And a few years ago, at the time of AT&T and Warner Media merging, and Warner Brothers and having our lot right, across the street from Hollywood, it just seemed like a natural connection to get involved with the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce. And so one of the things that I'm proud of and that I like to do is that when I show up to a board, I like to take a seat at the table, bring people along with me, but I have a seat at the table, so I make sure that I bring a voice. And that means that you put in time, that you bring in your talent, and that you volunteer for the assignments. And that really is a way that you get a chance to connect with your fellow board members, members of the organization, because you are putting in the time. And they're passionate about it. And so I'm proud that when I come and be involved, I'm showing up and I'm doing the work and rolling up my sleeves.
Yeah. But you reference, obviously, with AT&T, Warner Media, et cetera, that was a natural to get involved in Hollywood and thus the Hollywood Chamber. And I think, at the core, chambers are member benefit organizations, and a lot of people think that the Hollywood Chamber is about the big entertainment companies, but it really isn't. It's a much broader membership base, and I know you've just overseen membership and marketing over the last year or so. So share with us some thoughts on the diversity of the membership of the Hollywood Chamber.
That's a great question. You're absolutely right. When we think about Hollywood and think about the worldwide brand, and you're right, well, we have big studios that are members, while we have the Netflix and the Amazons and the AT&Ts that are members. Really, we are an industry of hospitality here in Hollywood. We have your mom and pop shops. We have your restaurants. We have companies that sell souvenirs. We have bus company tours. So it really is a cross-section of the industry's representative in Hollywood. And so while we have the major studios and the Paramounts involved in NBC Universal, I like to think about, our local, restaurants that are trying to thrive in this economy as we get ready to open up in 2022 are just as valuable and critical to the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce.
And certainly a big conversation for a lot of business groups and quote-unquote traditional chambers of commerce are just the ever-changing needs of businesses, particularly entrepreneurs, as you mentioned, and even the solopreneurs. So how do you think the chamber is evolving to meet the needs of diverse and emerging businesses?
I think about one word, and that is advocacy.
Okay.
It is critical when you think about whether it's your small mom and pop store or one of our larger members, is what kind of advocacy are you providing to help them navigate government, to help them navigate the business climate, commerce, the resources that are out there. And so that is one of the key roles that I see the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce and my colleagues bringing to our membership.
And you touched on, obviously, entertainment, and during the pandemic, productions just stopped. We saw with travel bans, et cetera, we are probably overweight in terms of our number of hotels, and that got hit. And then, of course, restaurants shut down, and we've got a lot of bars and clubs and restaurants. So I think, Hollywood certainly, took its hits during COVID. So as we appear to be moving beyond the pandemic, what observations can you share about how the business community has fared and impact on small businesses and their ability to recover?
Dwayne, COVID-19 played a huge impact in our Hollywood community. We are huge hospitality. And as you mentioned, hotels and restaurants, big studio productions, our lots, they all were shut down. And so when you think about the studios and all the resources and employees that they bring onto the lot, everything that they do, from whether it's their dry cleaning, the restaurant, the food that's brought in, everyone that's hired, that all came to a shutdown. And so it's been very hard on the Hollywood community. And the Hollywood Chamber, mobilized and looked at how do we bring resources, how do we ensure that our members know what the COVID-19 protocols are, how do we distribute kits to make sure that you have, the sanitation, the masks, the proper signage that was required. It was a very difficult time. And as we start to open up more, we've seen that a lot of businesses didn't survive.
Right.
They had to close down. And so it was a very hard time for a city. But now we are trying to look ahead and how do we continue to grow. And one of the things that we like to do is make sure that we visit those local restaurants and make sure to start to go out more often to be able to support those restaurants. And at the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce, we have different programming that allows us to also connect our members with different member restaurants or different organizations. And whether it's a lunch hustle or evening affair, it's a way of our members getting to know some of the other members and the great venues that we have in Hollywood.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned, obviously, the the role that restaurants play, because the episode to follow ours is actually one with 3 restaurateurs as we celebrate Dine LA Week, and we talk about the role and impact of restaurants to our local communities. So that's a great segue because it's so important to Hollywood. So that's a great thing. Certainly, the Hollywood Chamber is not a very traditional chamber. It's got these amazing assets that we all know globally, and certainly for our Civitas LA international listeners around the world, they're all familiar with either the Walk of Fame, and B, certainly everyone knows the Hollywood sign. So share with our listeners globally or nationally who may not know about the Chamber's role in these 2 assets, how they came into being, and what's the Chamber's, the short history of those 2 assets.
I'm happy to, and I love this question because people think about the Walk of Fame and they think that that's everything that the Hollywood Chamber, works on and does these Walk of Fame ceremonies. But there is so much more, as you know, really about leading the Chamber and ensuring that we're advocating for members. The Walk of Fame was created some 61 years ago. And it was the visionary leadership of the president back then who said, you have tourists from all over the world coming to Hollywood and LA, and they want to see Hollywood stars, and they don't. And so wouldn't it be great if we created something where they could see Hollywood stars? And that process probably took about 7 to 10 years to actually fully execute, from the renderings and what kind of materials were going to be used, working with the city of Los Angeles to ensure, what blocks we were looking at, and to develop and create this plan. But fast forward 8 to 10 years, and then you start having these stars. And so now people from all over the world come, and they can figure out to see if their favorite celebrity has a star and located in Hollywood. And we have 6 different categories. Initially, I believe it might have started with 4 categories. Then it was increased to 5. And then just most recently, within the last couple of years, we added a 6th category. And the categories are motion pictures, radio, recording, live performances, and sports entertainment now.
That's wonderful. And now 60 years later, there are over 2,700 stars out there now.
Yes, absolutely. And every single star ceremony is so unique and so special. And when you hear the honoree and his or her story, you're touched by it, because many of them come to Hollywood in search of being discovered, in search of really making an impact, whether it's bringing laughter or entertainment. And then when they get a star, and sometimes, it's usually big famous stars that you recognize. And when you get a star, you get to hear their story of how they first started. And you get to hear the story of their first time on the Walk of Fame and what it meant.
It's amazing what a draw that is to people.
Absolutely. And then when you think about the Hollywood sign, the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce also owns a sign, and it's in a relationship with the city of Los Angeles, as Mountain Lee is part of the city of LA. But with that, we manage the licensing and how that asset is used in movies across the world, and in other branding. And so it's a great opportunity for us to showcase our community. And when people come to Los Angeles and Hollywood, that's one of people's favorite hikes, is let's go see the Hollywood sign.
Right. Much to the chagrin of the residents of Beechwood Canyon.
Yes.
And recently, I noted after the glorious Super Bowl win from the Rams, there was an effort to reconfigure the Hollywood sign. Do you think there'll be more of those types of regional celebrations where the sign is manipulated in a way to celebrate something, an activity?
Dwayne, that was such an exciting time in our city and our history. And I will tell you, I commend the leadership of our fellow board members who worked on that to elevate and make it the Rams house.
Right.
It's something that we traditionally don't see, where we change those 9 letters to reflect anew. But it was so fitting and so appropriate, because there's nothing like a big sports win in Los Angeles to really bring us all together and have the pride. And I hope so. I hope that we start to see more of those things as we see these big celebrations in our region.
Well, Lupita, you've served. Obviously, you're going to be serving as chair of the board of the chamber as we move beyond the 100th year. But you've also served a number of other leadership positions at other civic organizations. So, how do you view leadership, and what experience do you hope to bring to this role as chair of the board?
Thank you for that question. When I look at leadership, I think about how do you inspire and motivate people. As chair of the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce, it really is about advocacy for our members. It's bringing our members along, and it's ensuring that they feel that they have a voice. And I also look at myself and think about, really, it's about a collaborative effort and working together. We have some exciting things in Hollywood, but we also have some challenges. And with that means that we have to work together to address those issues. I also like to think about the kind of work and efforts that are done by other leaders. And I think about, I'm the first woman of color to lead this organization in 100 years. It probably should have happened before this, but it's not lost on me. And so it's a tremendous source of pride. But I look at other amazing women who are doing the same, whether it's a great woman executive in corporate America, Brisa Sotelo Vargas, who is the chair of LA County BizFed. I think of Angela Gibson, who is the president and CEO of the Greater LA African American Chamber of Commerce. I will tell you, let me go back a few decades, and I think about Carol Schatz, who was the first president and CEO of the Central City Association back. I remember her from back in the 90s, and at the time she was the second in command and then was elevated to lead that organization, and the work that she brought to downtown LA and to revitalize it.
Yeah, I just think the world of Carol Schatz. I think she's just simply phenomenal. But it's interesting because, again, a number of these quote-unquote traditional business leadership organizations have all had, changes in leadership, whether it's at the LA Area Chamber, the CCA, amongst others, at the board chair or the executive director level. And we've now got a whole new wave of female leaders coming in to lead these business organizations. So I'm curious if you think, how that will, change the approach of the business leadership organizations, particularly in engaging with government, because as you well know, sometimes it's more challenging for business organizations to get their point across at City Hall.
I appreciate this question because when I mention all the other leaders, one that also absolutely stands out for me is Maria Salinas, who is the president and CEO of the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce, representing this whole region of over 10 million people. She, too, was the first woman of color and first Latina/Latino to have this role. First woman to be the president and CEO of this major organization. And I think that one of the things that women bring is a diversity of thought, but also different learned experiences. When I think about what we have gone through over the course of the last 2 years and working from home, and what it meant for families and homeschooling and childcare. We've all heard the term the Great Resignation. And who did that impact? It impacted women. Because as you were navigating who had to be, either working from home or childcare, it was women who ultimately were staying behind. And so with that, you have women leaders who think about issues a little bit differently, whether it's childcare and what needs to be done at home, and how do you advocate at City Hall for certain policies. And so I'm a great fan of Maria's, a good friend. but I admire her leadership and what she's been able to do. And as I take on this role, I look to be able to partner and work with my colleagues in these roles, whether it's Brisa or Angela or Maria or Tracy Hernandez.
Sure.
It's about working alongside to really improve our whole region.
Well, in the past, I know you've highlighted the importance of having male allies in women's success. So for our male listeners out there, how can they be better allies to women as you rise the ranks of business leadership in our city or in our country?
I appreciate this question because as I think about my own journey and think about, women of color leading this organization, and sometimes it's said, para Latina, I think of myself first as, I have a master's in public policy. I work for a Fortune 10 company leading external affairs in our LA market, one of our largest markets in the country. I was part of an executive team at a mayor's office. So I think about my background and, what qualifies me to be here today. But you also need someone to be an advocate for you. And many times, it's the struggle of, giving up power and how people give up the power. But you need a male or you need an advocate, not always a male, but it has been in my career that I have had many male supporters to say, let's look at Lupita to do this. And sometimes it's because we feel very comfortable with what we're familiar with or what we know. We don't advocate for others. But when you have somebody, and Dwayne, I've shared this story with you, you have been a great advocate for me. Another person who has been such a great male ally is Jerry Newman.
Yep.
And it's because you see that there's value to what I bring, and you want to lift up your fellow colleagues. And it's about humanity. When we think about issues and equality, it's about lifting all of us up.
Sure.
And the leadership. And so I thank you for doing that. I thank Jerry for being a big supporter and an ally.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So as you take on this role, starting April 1, 2022, leading the chamber as it starts year 101, a big conversation is always, again, going back to the relative value of these organizations and what they do and who they have served. So what are your hopes for the organization as it evolves, and how do you, sell the relative value proposition of this organization?
It's absolutely about what value do we bring to you. And one of the things I'd like to see is I'd like to see us to continue to grow. I want to make sure that our membership grows and that you see value in the advocacy that we bring. We have a cross-section of very different members, whether it's hospitals or two colleges. We have Emerson College and LA City College in Hollywood. We have small restaurants. We have bigger restaurants. I think about Musto and Frank's, long-time institution in the Hollywood community.
100 years now, too.
100 years, yes. But then I think of the Breakfast Club, who recently just opened. And so want to be a member advocate for whether you've been with us for a year or 100 years.
And certainly, I think we can, it is known that, the chamber also will have some new leadership coming in. So not only at the board level, but also in management. So that offers an exciting opportunity for the organization. What are your hopes for the organization under your leadership?
Well, yes, starting in April, we will have a new president and CEO, and it's going to be an exciting time as we think about the vision, as we think about what lies ahead in Los Angeles when we host the Olympics, when we host major sporting events, really about making Hollywood the destination. I think about the recently executive director that Mayor Garcetti announced and really his efforts to increase tourism in Los Angeles. I see Hollywood as a key destination point for that. And so how do we get engaged and be a partner in that to continue to grow people coming to Hollywood? So it's a lot a lot of work to be done,
Yeah.
and I'm looking forward to it.
Well, and certainly, that's a good segue talking about tourism, because we're so driven by that global tourism to our region. But also, as you well know, being an external affairs aficionado, we've got a mayor's race in Los Angeles this year. So there's just a lot of civic conversation going on. So what are your hopes for Hollywood and its place in that civic dialogue across our region?
As we look at, the growth and the modernization and the different pedestrian walkways, when we look at the al fresco opportunities of dining, it's a good time for us to really work closely with City Hall to make sure that they hear what our members need, what our members want, to have a seat at the table. And I mentioned earlier, when you have a seat at the table, it's to also have your voice heard and really be an advocate for your fellow members.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's great. This has been a great conversation. We're really looking forward to, the continued reemergence of Hollywood as, the essential community. Well, no, probably a lot of communities, but an essential community to a thriving Los Angeles, a thriving Hollywood is a key part of that. But we always like to get to know our guests as we conclude through our lightning round. And this is an opportunity since you're going to lead the Hollywood Chamber, for you to share with our guests a few Hollywood hotspots for those who may not be as familiar, or it doesn't have to be situated in Hollywood. You can cover the whole region. These lightning rounds are also an opportunity for us to learn some inside favorites. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Give us a favorite restaurant or two.
This year, my favorite restaurant is located inside the Hollywood Roosevelt Barish.
Oh, okay.
I actually just had dinner there. A few of our executives from AT&T flew in for some meetings, and I said, let's stay at the Hollywood Roosevelt and let's have dinner there.
Okay, we haven't heard that one. That's great. Excellent. Give us a favorite place to take a sip. It could be a coffee, tea, cocktail.
Dwayne, that's such a funny question because I have 2 young children, and so many times my sip is at home with my husband because it's when we have the downtime. But I have 2 new places that I recently discovered, thanks to you. I like anything with a rooftop, and it was the Thompson Hotel and Tommy Hollywood, and you introduced me to both of those. And so I am looking forward to getting to know more places in Hollywood where I can have a good glass of wine or a vodka soda.
It is all about the rooftops of Hollywood these days. I'm a big fan of Barlease, for sure. Favorite place to take a visitor to our region?
I love the Hollywood Bowl. I love everything about it, that you can picnic, that you can get there a few hours early and just sit and have conversation and enjoy the venue, enjoy people watching. My favorite place.
We are so excited that the Bowl Season 100 is taking place this summer, so great joy being brought back to our region. Favorite hike or park?
I have 2 favorites. I live in Porter Ranch, and so I do a hike around my house daily. I've been doing this for the last 587 days.
Wow.
Started during COVID season, and as you know, gyms were closed. And so the great thing about Los Angeles is that you do have the outdoors, and we have great weather. And so I walked a path leading up to my house with an elevation of 900 feet.
Wow. Okay.
The first time I did it, I thought I was going to die. It was August 2020. The second day I did it, I thought I was going to have to call my husband to say, come and pick me up. But 587 days later, I do it in a breeze. I have a dog that goes with me.
Oh, my gosh.
And the great thing about it is that you get to know your neighbors, and you have the regulars that do that same path. And then the other place that I love is walking up to the Hollywood sign. It's something that, my kids enjoy, and seeing the city from that view and seeing it through their eyes when they saw it for the first time. It's a whole different experience. But I'll tell you that my love for Hollywood goes back decades. And I mentioned I used to work for the mayor's office, and at the time, a good friend and mentor was the late former councilman Tom LaBonge.
Who loved the sign.
And so when I worked at the mayor's office, he took me on a tour of the city. Mm-hmm. And somehow every tour he went on always included the Hollywood sign or a fire station.
Right. And Griffith Park, of course.
And Griffith Park,
yes,
of course.
Share with us a hidden gem. You've given us some great favorites. Give us a hidden gem now.
Oh, the hidden gem, I think, has got to be the John Anson Ford Theater that is administered by the LA County. And it reminds me of a mini Hollywood Bowl. It's not very many seats, but you have a terrace where you could picnic and bring friends. And it's always in the beautiful, August, September nights where it's still, warm out, and get to enjoy a variety of performances. And one of my most favorite memories was about 15 years ago when my husband and I were dating, and we took his parents and my mom, I didn't have my dad at the time anymore, to a show there. And my husband was born in Oregon, raised in Northern California, Siskiyou County. So when you think about Northern, it's the Oregon.
That's way northern.
That's way
north. Way northern.
So they didn't have these kind of theater performances. And I remember the joy that my father-in-law had listening to trio music, which is a Spanish 3-person band.
This is episode 60, and I will say that is the first mention of the Anson Ford Amphitheater, and I love that spot as well, but we have not heard it, so thank you for bringing that up. That's a wonderful 1,700-seat outdoor amphitheater.
It's a hidden gem, and I wish that I could go every day because it's beautiful.
Yeah. And it's a lot more world music, a lot more eclectic mix of music as well.
Yes, as I mentioned, we were there to watch a tribute to a trio music, and but we've seen everything from flamenco to trio music to all sorts of different genres. And
that's great. Now, that's great. Love it, love it, love it, and terribly excited about the bowl season launching in just a few months. So, Lupita, as we conclude this year's Women's History Month series, I'm grateful for your participation, but I'm also grateful for all the women that we've had, not only this month, but we certainly want to celebrate women and leadership throughout the year, which we always do. But please offer any concluding thoughts you might have on how women can share pathways to create their own personal histories, and any other thoughts you want to share as we conclude this Women's History Month series.
I joined a podcast or a session earlier this week, and there was a key message that stood out, and it was, are you a pathfinder or a bystander?
Oh, wow.
And it was part of our AT&T leadership who led this discussion. And that resonated with me because I thought about, I want to be a pathfinder. And I think about women, and as we close Women's History Month, there are so many pathfinders in that. Whether I think about my grandmother, who I mentioned was widowed in her 20s and forged ahead and led a path to be able to have her little abarrote store, which is a tiny, tiny little convenience store. Or whether I think about, the kind of allies and supporters that we are to different communities, whether it's my African-American brothers and sisters, my LBGT community, Latinos, API. Women are able to do that and bring that together. And so I'm inspired by that. I look at our diverse city and I see a path for that. And so I'm here to be a pathfinder and to bring people with me to do that.
Well, we appreciate that. That's wonderful. This dialogue has been terrific. And I really appreciate your time. And we all appreciate your service to our community, not just Hollywood, but to the city as well. And we certainly look forward to, having you and or colleagues on as your time as chair of the board evolves under new leadership at the chamber. And we certainly look forward to things reopening and seeing Hollywood's continued reemergence and taking its central role in the play that is Los Angeles. As we conclude this year's Women's History Month Series 2022, Civitas LA extends deep gratitude to CGI Plus, Real Estate Investment Strategies in Woodland Hills, for their generous support of our work and their sponsorship of this series. To learn more, please visit www.cgiplus.com. And to our audience, as always, here we are at episode 60. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this program, and we hope you'll join us in 2 weeks as we engage with another great civic leader from our region. Until we meet again, stay strong and get involved. To learn more about Civitas LA and to share feedback on this program or recommend a future program, please visit us at www.civitasla.com. And don't forget to connect with us on Facebook at Civitas LA, on Instagram at Civitas_LA, and on Twitter at Civitas_LA.